I'm Whit Shiller. I am the host of the Improv Comedy Connection podcast, and I have been privileged to organize a COVID-19 Improv Summit, how the improv community is responding in light of the COVID-19 crisis. We have two episodes that we have put together for you that relate to specifically online improv. And the first session, which I'll moderate, will be dealing with why are we doing improv online? What are the implications of how we approach this art form in this new media? And you're going to hear from some great guests with some great perspective, some thoughts, hopefully some encouragement for you as well. So let's get into part one of online improv for the COVID-19 Improv Summit. All right, well, welcome to this second episode of the COVID-19 Improv Summit. We have a great group of people here to talk about what has been a very active part of the improv community in these last few weeks or months even. And we're going to have what I think is going to be a very engaging topic and a follow-up conversation on this as well. But I'm going to ask everybody to go around, and we'll start with Amey on this, to share their, first share who they are, give a little introduction about who you are and where you're from. And then I'm going to ask you to also say what has been the biggest impact that you've experienced in your improvisation or community with this move and increase in activity online. So Amey, we'll go to you.
Hi, I'm Amey Goerlich. I've been doing improv since 2001, and I was originally in New York, and then I moved out to Los Angeles. I'm at West Side Comedy. I help by being, I guess, the artistic director of eimprov.org. We started in 2014, Terry Withers and I, and stopped 2 years later and have restarted. I think the biggest thing for me personally, because I've been doing online coaching since 2014, is just the resurgence of it. And, you know, people back then thought it was so silly and it was just such a ridiculous thing that we were doing. And I really enjoyed the fact that I was able to connect with people in other countries and we did jams with people from, you know, all these different countries, and trying to organize that time-wise was really interesting. But then just getting to know the patterns of training from different countries was super interesting. And I think people are starting to see that again. Also, I you know, as an improv teacher, you never really make money. I mean, you make enough to survive, hopefully, but for some reason, these past 2 months, I've made more money than I've made in 5 years. So, like, actually have a savings. I feel very, very lucky that I have this bizarre niche job that is somehow, you know, making money at a time where a lot of people aren't making money right now. So, very lucky.
Elana.
Yeah, the money thing is really weird and surprising that we're able to sort of work. So I'm Elana Fishbein, and I am an improviser and teacher at the Magnet Theater in New York City. I have been doing improv since I was a teenager, so for a little over 20 years. And boy, how has the biggest thing changed? Was that the question?
Yeah, kind of what's been the biggest impact for you with the increase in online?
One of the things that has been so amazing is I've been able to do certain classes that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. Like, for instance, a class specifically for middle and high school theater teachers, an improv class specifically for them, kind of giving them tools and improv exercises that they can teach to their kids. And these are people who are busy all the time and would never be able to gather in a room together. But I've been able to put together this group, and we've been meeting and having an amazing time. And that always seemed to slip through my fingers when life was normal. And now we're able to actually manifest a class like that, which is incredible. And it's been incredibly inspiring. And I'll add this, one of the people in the class is a teacher of mine from a summer program I did in 1997. And it was that summer that I first saw Second City. And seeing that show made me be like, this is what I want to do with my life. So that's incredible that he's a part of that class.
Nice. Jay?
Hi, my name is Jay Sukow. I am currently based out of Los Angeles. I teach with Amey at Westside Comedy Theater. I also teach for Second City in Hollywood, and I have my own company called Today Improv. And yeah, I think the biggest impact was financially, because we're seeing a lot of people's income initially go to nothing. And you're also seeing a lot of theaters either suspending operations or outright closing. So I think that's like the initial big impact. And then after you weathered the storm for a couple of weeks, what you started seeing was this improv community started rallying together and said, okay, this is kind of accelerated innovation in a lot of what we do improvisationally. And so early on, I was like, I want to get on board with this. I want to be able to do scenes with people from all over the world and teach people all over the world. And maybe the money doesn't come at first, but if I can offer that, maybe it can be something that like helps us comfort each other in a strange way. And so I think it has done that. It's kind of brought this global improv community closer. And we don't have any other choice right now. We can't do anything live. So I think a lot of people are looking at this as an opportunity. And I know I'm one of them. I think it's the change is scary at first, but after you get used to this is how it is, and this is how it's going to be for a little bit, then there's an opportunity to reach people that you wouldn't have normally been able to reach. And it's become actually more affordable for a lot of people. And they can reach out to people on this panel and people that they've wanted to take a class with, and Lord knows we've got time. So now's a great time to reach out to a lot of improvisers that you want to learn from or want to play with. So I think after that initial fear and anxiety, people are starting to bounce back, and improvisers are very resilient. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Jules?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jules Munns. I am one of the ADs of the Nursery Theatre in London, and I also perform with the Maydays, which is a company from London and Brighton and kind of around the UK. Apologies for my camera, by the way. I don't know why it's doing that today. It's decided that this is the time to go in and out of focus constantly. I've been teaching improv online for about, I guess it's probably in the 5 or 6 weeks now. We got on it very, very quickly after the lockdown happened. Because in a few classes last year when we were thinking of rolling it out, and then some other things happened. So we had this like tiny little bit of experience doing it. I got to say, I love it. I was saying to Whit before we came on the kind of recorded section of this call. I'm a house cat. I like being in my house. I like my stuff. I like my chair. I like knowing that my coffee is in there and it's going to be the way I want my coffee to be. So I love this because despite the way I sometimes come across, I do actually really love people, and I love the opportunity to play with people globally is really exciting. I was teaching a class, I think it was 2 days ago, and the closest two students were in the next room to each other because they were a couple and they both booked on there in the next room to each other. And the furthest distance between students was one guy in San Fran and a lady in Wellington, New Zealand, which, so you don't have to look it up, is 11,000 kilometers because I did look it up. And I think it's going to be one of the things that Whit wants to talk about in this session, but to me, the joint function of improv as artistic aspiration, but also community building, and it's not a compromise between the two, it's both of those things at the same time. And I think how you can do the community building stuff on an even greater and wider scale is so exciting. Because we travel, Maydays travel a lot. I travel less than most of the Maydays, but still a fair amount. And there's so many people that I get to see who I never thought I'd see again, because I did a class with them 3 years ago, and now suddenly they're on my screen in my thing, and I've still got my own coffee in my own coffee mug. It's great. I mean, obviously, I don't want to make light of all the challenges that are going, all the challenging situations which are happening globally, but there is a lot to be happy about. Apologies if I gave my distance between Wellington and San Fran in the wrong. I was trying to go for the correct unit of distance, but yeah,
it is a heavier U.S. panel. Some late changes made us much more focused on the US than was originally intended. So all of the Americans listening are still having to look up what is 11,000 kilometers.
Jules, we got it. It's about 600 miles. We got the conversion. We're Americans. We're very smart.
Let's go to you, Paul.
I'm Paul Vaillancourt. I've been improvising for about 30 years. I started in an improv show, and I literally said to myself, that's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So I ended up joining that group and then going to Northwestern, joining a group there, and just sort of like trekking around, like wherever there was improv to be, I was there. I took a class from a guy who was teaching in the basement of the Department of Defense at one point. At Second City Comedy Sports, and ended up at the IO in Chicago, and ended up starting the IO West out here. I also host Improv Tips on YouTube, which is a resource for people to come and check out me and other people talking about improv and just giving our 2 cents. Oh, and also, sort of what is the biggest impact? I think sort of for me, the impact is more.
All right. Well, Paul, you on our end, it sounds like you're breaking up a bit. So we let you roll with it. Hopefully we caught a lot of that and you have a stable connection. But again, I guess how appropriate that we have one of the things that you have to deal with when you're having an online improv discussion is somebody's bandwidth or connection being what it is. So hopefully we caught it based on whether Zoom is recording on your end. We caught a lot of it though. So, and if that's not true, I was saying that to make you feel better anyways, Paul. So we'll see how she goes. Why don't we go to Roy?
All right. My name is Roy Janik. I'm out of Austin, Texas, and I'm part of a 4-person group called Parallelogramophonograph, or PGRAPH for short. We do a lot of narrative improv, and I'm also the artistic director and one of the owners of the Hideout Theater in downtown Austin, Texas. I've been an owner of that for about 11 years now, actually 11 years as of last week. And I started taking classes there a couple of years before that, so in 2005. So that's been where my experience has been. As far as like the biggest impact, mine isn't quite as rosy because being an owner and artistic director of our theater, which is also a coffee house, the financial side of the equation will never balance or even come close to balancing. We're live streaming all of our shows now on Twitch, which is a free platform, but we do sell tickets to them on a voluntary basis on our website. And we are actually selling tickets to those shows. But still, when you compare the number of tickets we're selling for online versus the number of seats we were filling on any given weekend and the lost revenue of the coffee house, it's a complete wash. But the thing that we are learning, and the thing that's super useful, is what our community of performers and students actually wants out of our theater when the theater isn't there. We've been doing a lot of shows, and a lot of them are interested in performing, but more than anything, they want that sense of community to continue. And whether that just be engaging with our Facebook group or participating in jams or taking specialty workshops or even just getting together to watch things, watch TV shows together, all of that stuff, trying to figure out like what value do we bring to the table when we're not literally just bringing our physical space. It's kind of a unique opportunity to learn that specific corner of our business, because I think Jules is totally right when he was saying, you know, you're balancing the finances and the artistic merit and community all the time. And now at least, you know, through no choice of our own, finances is kind of out of the equation. So we can actually focus on one aspect of the business that we couldn't ever focus on in isolation before. Now, that being said, we're making up some of the finances with our classes because there's a lot of strong interest in learning, and now our potential student base is worldwide. Especially, we have a very strong youth program, and there is so much interest right now in kids classes because parents want their kids desperately to have activities to do where they don't have to engage with them every single minute of it. Yeah. And there's a lot more. Also, doing shows is really fun. There's a lot to say. We'll get to it.
Okay, Vaughn.
Ditto to everything everyone said. That's the benefit of being last.
How
My name is Vaughn Daniel. I'm here
Yeah.
in Dallas. I'm here in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm current owner of the Comedy Arena. We're actually celebrating our 3-year anniversary of being open. I am currently in comedy sports. I currently sit as the president of Comedy Sports Worldwide. How this has impacted us in comedy sports is actually it's really interesting because it's rough for everyone. But because comedy sports has nearly 30 branches worldwide, we're actually able to challenge each other on a weekly basis. So you might see, like last week we had Houston versus Dallas. You might see Manchester versus Portland. So it has kind of opened up the world for us to actually be able to see and play with people we've never been able to do that with. Comedy sports has an annual championship we have each year where we see each other, but this has a lot of platform where we can actually see each other almost on a daily basis. I'm seeing people now that I usually see once a year. I'm seeing them like 5 times already. I'm like, I just saw you yesterday. Do we have to do this again? But it lends to having to see all these faces and having community. Where we are, our theater is actually in downtown McKinney. So we've actually opened up to some of our merchants where the merchants there are closed. They aren't able to have servers there. And we've actually done virtual shows for them where we've added more to the community by bringing in merchants from a coffee shop to maybe an arcade to possibly the comic book store. And we'll get together and do like a panel with some jokes and some improv. And it's kind of opened up the community because we're all kind of in this together. And it's kind of see the personalities come to life where we never would have done this if we hadn't been in the situation that we're in now. We literally would have just heads down, continued our business, stay in my lane. But this has kind of forced us out of our comfort zone to play and be interactive with people that we probably wouldn't be. So that's how it's probably impacted us the most besides the financial. So yeah, and kudos to everyone of what you said, because I was going to say the exact same thing. So there.
Well, I guess I get to go last, and ditto to everything that everybody just said. That was my line, Vaughn. No, it's I'm Whit Shiller. I am the one of the head fish sticks at Fish Sticks Comedy, and I'm based in Milwaukee. And we have teams in Atlanta, Denver, and Dallas as well. And for us, I think the biggest impact has been the community aspect among the individuals in these different markets who knew each other some, and we have interactions on social media and things like that. We have, a periodic interaction in person, but now we are seeing these people, like Vaughn said, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week now, and those social media connections are also different as well and more strong. So that has been a very big impact for us, as well as, things kind of shutting down in terms of the live stuff. I want to circle back though really quickly, Vaughn, for you, and maybe it's just to clarify, when you say you're opening your space up to local merchants, are you opening up your virtual theater front, if you will? Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so we tagged on a new branch of our business. So we're called the Comedy Arena, but during this portion of time, we are the Comedy Virtual Arena. So we have a show called Fibbers, where we invite merchants from across our Metroplex to come on our show. And we kind of ask them questions, and they're trying to lie to 2 comedians. And we're trying to figure out if they're telling us the truth or lie. So what that has done is those merchants have now opportunity to share that event with other people. And now everyone who may not have known the business owner of the arcade now gets to get a little more personality of that person. Kind of maybe even some inside jokes that they may know about that person that they would not have known before. And then when this is all over and you're actually able to go back physically into the arcade, you actually be like, oh, hey, that's Mike. I know him. He's the guy that found the thing in the thing because he told the lie on the thing on the show. So it kind of is, it's kind of planting the seeds for future, for when we do get back together, that those relationships now can have built or started from the virtual shows.
Wonderful. Well, let's there's obviously a lot of richness to what was in each of those answers. So let me just pick out a couple things, because our time is going to fly by in this this particular session. Let me start with the money aspect of things in a sense. And there were a number of comments regarding what the impact was. And clearly the physical shows, you know, vanished. I mean, we saw our show calendar go from really strong to where did that all go in overnight almost, right? And what do you think that experience tells us now that you've also had some of the reaction from the people in your communities as to what is primary that we as improvisers or the improv community provides? What is our primary product, and do we look at that at all differently now that we've had this experience? Paul, go ahead.
Okay, great. So I think for me, it really points out in stark relief kind of something that I felt in LA. One time I was listening to a guy talk about marketing, and he talked to a beer company, and the beer people were saying, we're not versus other beers, we're versus share of mouth. Anything that people want to put in their mouth versus beer, that's what we're competing against. And I feel like in LA, it's really clear to me that like we're not just versus other improv theaters, we're sort of like versus like staying home, we're versus going to that cool party in the hills, we're versus that movie premiere. So I think now what I think is really interesting is that now we're, as an improv community writ large, we're sort of on TV, like, or on the internet versus everything else on the internet. And so to me, that really sort of points out the thing that improv sort of brings, or that I've always sort of really gravitated to, or what I think, why people I think come out of their houses or go to an improv show versus anything else, is that sense of community. It's like, I've said it before, it's like there's some primordial part of us that likes sitting around the campfire, telling stories, watching stories. We're all in that environment together in this thing that is essentially ephemeral. It's there for 30 minutes or an hour, and then it's gone. And then it's literally, you had to be there, right? So I think that sort of, for me, a big part of what we offer is that experience, that community, that sort of like connecting with other people. And we were there that time that X happened, you know? Because otherwise it's like, if it's just like, oh, entertainment, like it's an improv show versus the Avengers on Netflix or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's, the equation's tricky otherwise.
Roy?
Yeah, I totally agree. I just wanted to add a little bit to that. I don't think we've ever been in competition with other improv theaters. It's always, we're in competition against inertia or Netflix or anything like that. And I think part of the thing that we've noticed is our theater is very focused on performance. So we knew we wanted to do shows right away. One of the things that we thought was like, oh, we can also show reruns of some of our old shows that we recorded, but it hardly got any engagement. And I think that the reason for that is that the thing we are providing is that interactivity and that community. And even though we're doing like improvised plays, there's something about people watching the show live and maybe being in the chat room and just literally typing ha ha ha, or that was great, to make it feel like they're part of the live experience and that they're you know, witnessing the act of creation, which I think is a big part of the appeal of improv, that we're all sort of creating it together. And their energy, even in the chat room, is having an impact on the show. In fact, I was hesitant at first to like keep the chat room that we do all our shows on Twitch open and kind of clock it while we were doing the show. But I found it's become a good substitute for the audience's laughter and clapping. And so I kind of keep a soft focus on it. And it makes me feel like, oh, I'm not just performing in a void. There are people there. And that's nice. Yeah.
Jules, you had your hand next.
Yeah. Frustratingly, Roy said a lot of the stuff that I was going to say better than me and just before me, but that's just having conversations with Roy. So I think the question was raised about like, we give people the value of just having been there, and the word there gets really problematic in this environment, because in what sense are we there? In what sense are we here? anyone who's listening to this conversation, who's not part of it, is listening to it after the event, and they're listening to us having genuine interactions, but there is something slightly less there, which is interesting. And then to Roy's point about having people on Twitch and interacting there, a lot of people are creating shows which are maybe created in Zoom and then streamed through Twitch. So you have different layers of audience possibility. Someone could be in the Zoom room with you or in a Zoom webinar with you. They can be watching it on Twitch live. They can be watching it on Twitch later. There's lots of different versions of there, which our brains, I don't think, are particularly well equipped to deal with. Because right now, my brain's buying that you're all in my study, and I love it. You all seem like lovely people, those of you that I haven't met before, and those that I have met before, you are lovely people. Apologies for my camera again. So it's, yeah, it's like there are bits of our brains which we're trying to, I'm going to say fight against, but I don't think it's that. I think we're trying to work out how to use the best things and ignore or bypass the unhelpful bits. And also, Roy, a couple people said very generously, we weren't fighting other improv theaters. I'm fighting other improv theaters, and now I can take you all down. I just wanted to mention that.
Elana, the challenge goes to you. Take Jules down. Let's see this point.
Right. I don't know, but maybe I'm taking a bit of a pivot, because I want to just talk about more like how classes and trainings are really creating a sense of community. Like, I think that a lot of people do improv because it's cheaper than therapy. Like, we know this to be true, right? And it is therapeutic. It makes people feel a lot better, and especially more now than ever, people like really need like relief from their mental state, and they are seeking connection because they're some are in very, very dire situations, or they just need relief, whatever it might be. And so I think like all of us in this room, like we are masters of our craft to some degree, or whatever that even means. But like my thinking when all this happened was, I can figure out Zoom really quickly, and I'm brave enough to like throw myself into this. I need to just make other people feel comfortable with it so that they can reach out to their communities. Because if suddenly this, this line to, therapeutic improv is cut off because people are afraid to teach or to facilitate, or they don't feel like they're up to it, then people are going to be miserable. And so I think like we all have a responsibility to make more and more people feel comfortable reaching out to people in their community and keeping those practice groups going, whatever it might be,
Did you feel that we'll just use the label you used in terms of therapeutic, was a big part of what you or your theater was offering pre?
I think so. I think like, I don't know that people would say that explicitly. I think part of it is because it's dangerous. Like, we're not therapists, right? But we know that we have community value and personal value to individuals, and that it, the magnet, and I'm sure all of your theaters, like, they're really community oriented. It's not about getting famous. It's not about being funny. It's about doing scene work that is all about like connection and strong relationships. And there's a reason why, because there's a lot of heart there. It's, that's that when all of this is vanished and we don't have our theaters, like all we have is people. Like, it doesn't matter whether we're funny or not.
Let me go to Amey. Let me go to Amey next, and then I'm going to kind of move the topic a little bit, just in the interest of time. But Amey, you've had your hand up and haven't spoken on this issue or this.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. I think the thing that I found from doing it for back in the day and then revisiting it is I'm almost loving this idea that I can have my improv shows recorded. And also because I've done it for so long, I have a lot of interesting people that find me on Reddit. So it's like I'm working one-on-one with a German doctor who's been trying to figure out a way to bring improv into his practice with his patients who are terminal. And it's been some of the most interesting conversations ever. And he was like, let's record these because I'm going to use it in my panels. I'm going to use it in my book so I can reference certain topics that we're talking about. And I was just like, my mind was like blown by some of the concepts that he was coming up with, because he had taken probably 20 improv classes all over the country, with, flown from Florida all the way to Chicago to take an improv class. And he was kind of trying to do the opposite that we do, which was, because I was constantly telling him when he took my workshops, like, oh, don't change, stay the same. People are inspired by your moves, so they're tagging in, that kind of stuff. And his whole concept is he's trying to get patients to think that they can change. So going from a person who thinks of themselves as sick or ill and terminal, and to allow themselves to be a new person and to have a different skin and not be sick and not be, so it's been really cool. And also, like Elena was saying, I love the fact that I've been recording all of my rehearsals and then picking a tag run of the week that I think is really good and really fun and explains game on like a certain aspect that maybe I'm teaching to a class. And then I'll be in the middle of class and I'll be like, hey guys, let's watch this clip, this 7-minute tag run I have that clearly shows a simple game, and show them and be like, what was funny? What made you guys laugh? And then hearing different people's brains on like liking a sub game better than the main game. Or so it's been really helpful to have the idea that this art that we are like, yeah, let's go do a show and just kind of let it go. And that's it. Now I'm like, yes, now we can save them and use them later to like get points across. Or even my own, I've taught a Cronf class for like almost 18 years in New York, and I could write a curriculum down, but now I actually have recordings of it where I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that I've used to do this all the time, and like actually being able to write out a curriculum. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Let me ask, as like I said, a little bit of a pivot on this. One of the things that is true that has been acknowledged in this discussion is that everyone is accessible to everyone else in a way that was true before, but is now very present and real for us. And so for those of us who have the ability, and I suppose just sort of the headspace to kind of lean into that, because there are plenty of talented improv instructors who haven't made that jump, at least at present, because of just the circumstances and kind of working through that, right? So this is in some ways a self-selecting group of sorts who is able to or choosing to at this time to kind of move forward, whereas others might feel more frozen or scared. But here's what that said, I want to kind of explore a little bit. There are positives to those who jump into it, and there are positives to those who have the ability to create connections more broadly. I've had some great experiences with that myself, and I'm enjoying that. But there are also some other consequences to it. So I'm going to ask just if someone would want to spend a little time talking about, well, what would be the negative aspect of maybe the increased availability of certain instructors?
I think like the thing is, we all have to have boundaries, right? And that's like normal for real life too. Like just say you're not available. Don't fill up your calendar, because these are crazy times and you need to take care of yourself too. Really. Mm-hmm. That's totally fine. That's it.
Okay.
Oh, and that's also a reason why you need to train more people to teach improv, right? That's it. Okay, now it's it. Then that's it.
Roy, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So if the question is maybe about, that because it's a worldwide kind of improv audience and potential student base, if like certain people are making themselves extremely available, then we're suddenly all competing with each other. I don't know if that's what you were going at, but I'll go down that road for a second. Why not? Oh, for instance, like the Maydays are doing, like they jumped in immediately and they're offering daily and now like twice daily drop-ins for people across the world. And they already have like a great rep. And so, you know, they're pulling people in. But the thing I've learned like locally with the improv scene is that ultimately all that stuff makes your product stronger and gives you ideas. And when you're not operating in a vacuum, your growth grows tremendously. Like when I first took over the Hideout with a couple of other people, my theater, we were the only improv theater in town. And then a few years later, another improv theater started up with people that we knew and loved, but still suddenly we had competition, and they made community their first priority right out of the gate. And pretty soon we were like, we have to do more in terms of building up our community and make people feeling welcome at our theater if we're going to compete with them in that regard. So I don't know, even if someone has their act together and they're blasting out ads to a worldwide audience, I think ultimately it'll just make everyone stronger. At least that's what I'm telling myself.
Jay?
You know, it's funny. Improv is the only art form that somebody who's never seen an improv show can go to one improv show, and if it's terrible, they'll never see improv again. Like they will not see the art form. They'll be like, I've seen improv. And I think the same can be said of some teachers where if like, and this is my personal view, is if you're not creating a safe space, and you can drive somebody away from taking improv classes because you as the teacher, you are not creating that safe space, or you're telling a student, here's what you should have done in a scene, and you're making them feel bad about their choices. To me, that's more of a negative consequence. Is like, yeah, don't come into this because you want to fill your ego, or you want to be king of the room, or you want to make people feel bad because of how fun you are or how smart you are. So you want to like show the students how to improvise, and you're going to drive them away. So that's the one negative for me, is like, you shouldn't be driving people away. It should not be an unsafe space. So I feel like as long as you're making it a safe space where people can grow and challenge themselves artistically, for sure, I think that's fine. But when you start letting your ego get into play and you start making it something other than what it's not, then I have an issue with that. It's like, it needs to be safe for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's those are all interesting observations, and in part, I guess my question did have a little bit of a different kind of angle on it, but I think all of these responses are interesting and important. I guess part of it for me feels like there are, and maybe this is just kind of sort of evaluating sort of an American culture kind of thing, where there can be almost like a colonization kind of aspect in terms of the cultural aspect. Do we have some of the same aspects in terms of our improv schools of thought, where if this maybe more developed just based on time and developing curriculum over the years, or tracing back to this mentor, instructor, whatever, and then exporting that to a community that is developing its own voice, figuring it out on the way, do we end up missing some of the twists that may come from a younger improv community that has been overwhelmed by the quick influx of these established schools of thought? Jules?
Yeah, I think I feel like everything I'm going to say this evening is going to start with the question that interests me, and I have no answers to any of this, is about how we define the boundaries of our communities now. And Roy was talking about their community in Austin, who are a very strongly locally, geographically defined community, whereas the Maydays community, because you know, we as a company, again, sorry for the camera, as a company we started in Brighton, which is it's not tiny, but it's not big. There's not enough people there to maintain a professional improv troupe. So we did more stuff in London, and then we travel internationally. So I would say that the Maydays community is defined more by a relationship to us than it is by anything specific to where anyone lives. And I think historically, improv communities have been defined geographically, and in those cities which are large enough to sustain more than one, they've been defined then geographically and then divided into the kind of 2, 3, 4 schools, however many, like UCB, IO, you know, Annoyance, those kind of things, speaking as a massive outsider to any of this stuff. And I suspect that over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to completely redefine, rethink how we define the idea of an improv community. Because I know, I was teaching class this afternoon, and there was a lady there from Pakistan who has been to quite a lot of our classes, who I met when I was over there a few years ago. And there's a lady there from Bethnal Green, which is about 2 miles in that direction. And their reaction to each other was, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in days. How are you?" Like I had to stop them from bubbling and kind of taking over the whole class because they were so pleased to see each other. And there's no way that you can't call that as important a sense of community as people who can clap each other on the back in the physical space and buy each other a beer. We are just not used to how that works yet. And it's not to throw aside, it's not to ignore the kind of physical geographical communities, but these other communities are going to have to be in existence. And I think there is a danger of those established schools and teachers and all those and companies kind of, what's the word? Franchising and being able to sell globally. I think there is a bit of a danger of that, but whenever you have a business or a community in which one idea or a few large, solid, defined ideas seem to be taking over and monopolizing, people are gonna start being difficult. People are gonna start doing it in another way, and people are gonna start opening up spaces to do something in a very different way. And that is 100 times easier in the internet, in the online space. Like, you want to open a theater, that's in 25,000 pounds minimum in London, which is 300 miles in case someone's trying to convert it. But if you want to open an online theater, that's $150 for Zoom, and get a friend to design a logo and have at it. If you're good, people are going to come. So yes, there's absolutely that danger. And while we're talking about dangers, and I promise I will shut up, there is also the danger of those people who will never cross the bridge into the online space. There is those people who are financially, practically, emotionally, psychologically unable to engage with people in this way. I am right on the boundary of being technically a millennial. I am not a millennial, but technically I'm right on the boundary of it. And I feel like it would be very easy for me to have just gone, improv on a computer? That's not improv. And then just gone in there and read a book. And there's thousands or millions of people who would have done that same thing as me. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
Sorry, Amy?
I'll try to be quick. I think this kind of answers a couple of the questions, but when I started doing online coaching in 2014, we kind of had a collection of people that were doing it. So what we would do is, once we've kind of tapped out of our kind of expertise, or we saw that a team needed to work on something new, we would recommend. So it was like Anthony Atamanik would recommend me to a team in Kansas City, and then I would recommend Kevin Mullaney from Chicago to work with them. So we kind of all worked together to do like 6-week stints with these different teams. And just the other day, like, I've been working with this guy who's a professional poker player who just decided he wanted to become an expert on improv, and he wants to do daily improv rehearsals with just me, and we'll go for an hour, and then he'll be like, want to do another hour? And I'm like, oh, because then I'll have to teach a class later. It's like, sure, I'd like the money, but also my brain kind of taps out at a certain point. So the other day I said, hey, I'm going to bring a guy on, and we're going to do scenes. And it was just my husband, who's also an improviser, in the kitchen. And so the three of us did stuff, and he was like, hey, when we take our days off, can I ask Zach to do stuff? So now it's like every other day we work with this one guy, because I'm like, take him for an hour, like, please. So I think that we don't need to be afraid of someone being overly worked, because I think we're all kind of community based enough to go, I'm done teaching what I know, and now I want to, send them to Jules, because I think that he'll have an interesting way of converting whatever they're working on now.
Let me come to you, Vaughn, as a follow-up. One of the reasons that I thought it would be interesting to have you on is also your perspective with comedy sports, which I think in general has had a different model and target that is more for a mass audience as opposed to improvisers. So there's a community and there's also some of the external focus that has been there. And I saw that with Dick Chudnow, who was part of my training experience, the founder of Comedy Sports. And it sounds, just even based on what you shared earlier, that that's been part of your experience as well. Does the aspect of the broader availability, how does that factor into how Comedy Sports might think of it on a kind of on a corporate level, if you will, versus maybe what some of the either individual instructors or the individual standalone theaters might think about it? Does that question make sense?
No, but I can figure it out.
Okay.
So Comedy Sports, as you know, we have a lot of different facets and a lot of different branches. So we are really heavily into AI, which is applied improv. So we have curriculum that's specifically designed for corporations to go in and do, some people might just quote it as team building, but AI is the applied improv of what you could take from the improv world and bring it into the corporate world, and how can you tweak those tools and those mechanisms to work in every facet of working with other adults, which is what improv is pretty much all about. How do you get your idea to work with everybody else to yes and to get all on the same page? So Comedy Sports has always been doing that in the real world, and now that we are in this virtual environment, we've actually, I don't want to say it was an easy transition, but it was something we were already doing. So the ability to tweak some of those tools that we were doing physically, doing it online, has allowed us the opportunity to actually go into these same businesses that we normally would go into and say, hey, we know you had to cancel your physical thing, but we still can offer you this online thing. And we're actually getting a lot of success with it. So a lot of the companies, because their employees are working from home and they're not able to actually go into an office or go into a community center or wherever they would gather and do these activities for them. So we've actually seen a great, we've been received very positively by the businesses that we've worked with in the past. Now, on the aspect for kids, so Comedy Sports is for everyone. So it's a clean format. This purposely designed that way. So we are HR friendly. We literally can go anywhere and not worry about content being inappropriate. So that also dovetails into our high school leagues. So we're still able to work with some of our high school drama teachers and providing them with curriculum. As was mentioned earlier, those teachers are starving for something to do with their kids, and now they're scrambling to how do I teach my kids in this environment, especially drama or improv, and we're able to still lend those tools to those institutions. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let me close our time, because we're right there, and one of the advantages of having a panel of this size is the number of perspectives. The disadvantage is the amount of time that we get to hear from each individual perspective. But I'm going to ask at least a few of you to answer this last question as we close our time for this portion of the summit. And that is, if you were to look forward, let's say we've got the vaccine, and everybody is not worried about COVID-19 anymore, and we're able to go back to normal if that's accessible to us, as it isn't in this moment. What place do you think, or what would the vision of how the improv community does its best in having online improv part of the mix? What does that look like? What do you foresee or want to see on the other side of this crisis?
I don't think we're ever going back. I think this is a brand new normal. And I look at it like, the more that this progresses, the more the technology is going to get better. It's going to get cheaper. It's going to get more affordable. And I think it's going to be part of what we offer. I think definitely, we all got into this because it was fun to do things in person, and we like that feedback. And as a performer, it's a lot different right now improvising for a camera than it is improvising for a live audience, but it's almost like looking at this as improvising on film rather than improvising live. But I think as we move forward, I think there are so many more cool innovations that are happening that we're forced to do that I think it will become part of what we offer. And like Amey said, you know, you're working with people all now across the world. And so you're able to do that. Whereas before people might not have been able to afford to go to festivals or travel to various towns. They can reach out and work one-on-one with pretty much anyone. And I did a scene the other day with my buddy, David Escobedo, and he had cut out a paper towel ring, and he put it up to the camera, and then it looked like he was looking through a tunnel. And I said, oh, cool, we can start now incorporating a lot of those devices and techniques and kind of playing around. But I don't think it's going to return back to where it was. I think this whole online virtual improv is going to be just an addition. And like I heard earlier, some people just only will do it live in on a stage or in a classroom with other people, and then some are going to look at expanding and branching out and using this and utilizing this format. So I think there's definitely an excitement moving forward, because this is now another way to reach people. And you have to look at it as like, why are you doing improv? Why are you teaching improv? Why are you performing improv? And then that can help kind of navigate where you land. But I think this is the new normal, and it's just going to continue to grow and evolve.
Right.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think that my theater will be doing nearly as much as we're doing right now if we have our physical space open. But the thing that I think is super interesting is the stuff that the advantages that you do get regardless of the situation of the world. Like this came up in the chat room of one of our shows recently. They asked if my 4-person group was going to keep performing this way when the theater reopened. And we were like, well, we're not going to do 5 shows a week. But there's been a core group of like 4 people that are tuning into all of our shows, and none of them live in Austin. It's someone in Florida, someone in Boston, and someone in, I can't remember where, but not in Austin. That's the point. And it would be a real shame to just let that relationship drop. And plus, doing online improv is super fun. So I know my 4-person group will probably at least do a monthly show and have guests from all over play with us. And also the kids classes, that stuff I think can still be, it's so useful and such a great option to offer people. And then also we were talking earlier about these different schools of improv being unique, and the worry being that other people or other schools with bigger engines of marketing are going to kind of steamroll them. But I think the opposite can also be true, which is like my theater specializes in doing like theatrical narrative style improv. And like we can offer these targeted online workshops to people throughout the world. And I think that's a really cool thing. It'd be like, learn what makes our theater unique and take the stuff that you find useful going forward. So yeah.
Jules?
I am fascinated by the possibilities of shows which blend online and offline. We were experimenting with live streaming our shows with moderate success before we moved out of the theater. I'm fascinated to see what could happen, that you have an audience in the space who's watching the show in the way that we all kind of grew up with and count with and expect, and also audiences online having a different but equally valid experience. And the same thing for workshops. There is absolutely no reason why someone can't teach a workshop with 10 people in the space, and if that's shot well, you have a moderator or second teacher who's looking after the online class, which is following some of the same material. I'm fascinated by that. And also everything that Roy said, because don't go after Roy in any conversation.
So let me finish our time really quickly. I'm going to go to Paul, and then I'm going to come to you, Amey. I'll give Amey you the last word, and I'm doing that intentionally for a couple reasons. But Paul, when you started doing improv online, so to speak, it was through a channel of content.
Yeah.
And that has continued to be something that you have developed. And there were aspects that you were able to reach anybody in the world with those before. Does that experience that you had inform what you expect you're going to continue to do next, either with that type of channel or how you might place it? Where do you think that fits going forward for you?
That's a great question. When I sort of, to echo some of the things that other people have said, I think Roy sort of kicked it off, just the idea that one of the reasons I started doing improv tips was because I thought, well, I have something to share, something to contribute, and I can't be everywhere. But through the magic of YouTube, I sort of can. And I've gotten a lot of really interesting comments from people in Russia and Germany and like around the country and around the world. And it's really amazing to be able to take something you love, like improv, and share it with someone and just have it be there. And they can, you know, watch it whenever they want, as much as they want or as little as they want, whatever. And I think that's been really exciting. In terms of what the next thing is for me, I'm not totally sure. I'm sort of like an old dog learning some new tricks. Like I was alive and aware before the internet. And so in some ways I'm trying to catch up. I think that like younger people who are more natively digital citizens are making a lot more interesting discoveries than I am. I'm always sort of kind of laboring, trying to disabuse myself of this idea of putting everything through an analog lens, and then how do I put that online? Like hearing you guys talk about it is really interesting because I think you guys are coming from such different angles than I'm coming from. It's much more interesting, advanced angles. Like I'm getting super psyched about this conversation. I'm like scribbling sort of some notes, and I know that my sort of journey with this started years ago, actually, when I talked to Amey just in passing, and she sort of told me about some of the stuff she was doing. I was really interested and fascinated by it, but I'm just trying to sort of find the way that makes sense to me, or the way that sort of that I can do it, because right now, I don't know, I struggle with, I personally struggle with the Zoom format of an online improv show. And so I'm trying to figure out like, what is the next step that makes sense to me? I know a lot of people, that's great for them, but I'm, like I said, an old dog learning some new tricks. And so I'm not totally sure what the next thing is. I mean, I definitely want to keep doing improv tips and sort of sharing those sort of static little pieces of information, those static ideas that people can access, like a book, like a very analog sort of allegory of a book or you know, something like that. But I am really interested in sort of taking it online and see if there's a more interactive way to do it. But I don't know. I'm sort of learning a ton from this conversation. So I think I need to sort of just percolate on it and sort of figure out what my next step is. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. Amey, let me ask you, you had your hand raised, so you may have a comment you want to kind of weave into this, but let me ask you to kind of finish our time as someone who has been doing online performance-based improv, which has been a topic, but it hasn't been the primary focus of our time. Can you share what the arc of that experience was, not in full, but in more, what I'm asking is, what do you think that your experience can teach those of us who are going down the performance online route, so that it is that much more successful or useful, or whatever it is? What lessons are there for someone who has been doing it for 6 years?
Yeah, I think that it kind of ties into back to like this idea of analog, and the stuff that Jules was talking about, and Paul. What I've noticed from doing a lot of shows lately is that I can see that I've had more experience with this kind of format. So I feel like the level of my performance is kind of comparable to what I do on stage, because I'm not limiting my imagination to this box, which is like, that's what I tell people who are kind of weary about doing this kind of performance. I say, well, we're already in an empty box with no costumes and no props. Like, we're already asking the audience to have this like mirror neuron experience with us where we have zero things to be holding or doing. So why is it any different? Why are we limiting our, you know, it's like Jay was saying, like people using different things, and like I've seen people doing like fire, and everybody's doing fire at the bottom. It's like, we just have to remember our 5-year-old selves and become playful again, you know, and burn it all down. But I did want to just say that the thing that I love, see, that's what's so lovely about improv. Everybody just yeses it. But there's a team called Neutrino in New York that I'm sure Elena knows, but and some of you guys do too. Elana, I'm teasing. It was a bit, and I'm like, it's a bad bit. But what they did was at UCB, they were a Herald team that would come on stage, get a suggestion, and then they would disperse out into the city of New York in twos with a camera person. Each one of them had a camera person, and they would come run back to the theater. And this was still analog, and they would run their tapes. And then another video guy would come in and they'd run their tape. So it was the beats of the Herald. And at the time, everyone's brain would explode. But even when we were doing e-improv, we had these young college kids that would come to me and be like, hey, we're going to do multiple Google Hangouts and switch it like a TV production. And all of us will be outside doing scenes and we won't be able to see each other's work. And I was like, yes. So I think what we need to do is kind of go back to the beginning of how we thought of improv when we first started. And also this idea of analog versus digital, and how can we play like editors as like movie editors rather than, you know, we're limited.
Wonderful. Well, as I said along the way, lots of great perspectives. And I know we've just kind of scratched the surface on this. We are going to spend time together with at least most of our panelists on a continued conversation about online improv. But thank you to all of you for your contributions to this conversation, for the openness to sharing and the encouragement to step forward, to say yes, to see what's new. And there just might be a very exciting world on the other side of this. There's a lot of optimism on this panel. I hope that is something that is also maybe a gift to some others who could use a little bit of that, take some of that and do well online as well. Thanks to Amey, Elana, Jay, Jules, Paul, Roy, and Vaughn for their contributions to this first portion of the online improv exploration and this sort of breakout session for the summit on the improv community's response to COVID-19. A lot of great insight. There is a part 2 to this, which you can certainly move right to on the podcast or online on YouTube, where this will be put out. And we will have a discussion a little bit on the how, but even though there's going to be a lot of great insight and tips about putting on a performance and training online, you're also going to find a lot of encouragement in that as well. So I encourage you to check out part 2 of this exploration of, again, online improv.